I find some people kind of throwing these kinds of things at me. There are harsh comments that Jesus makes where he says, for example, probably the most famous is the Synagogue of Satan. Jesus uses the phrase Synagogue of Satan. And the idea here is, well, there you go. Jesus is repudiating the Jews. He is denouncing the Jews. He's distancing himself from the Jews. In fact, this is really why the Jews targeted him. This is why they went after him. This is how they got him. How do you make sense of those kinds of passages, and how should we understand them?
Well, there's a big difference between discipline and relinquishing ownership or possession of something. And really the way to understand this is as how the Abrahamic covenant about 2000 BC, Genesis 15, interacts with the Mosaic covenant given at Sinai. And that's a full 600 years, roughly 6 centuries later. And most people, what they do is they take those covenants and conflate them. But they're two different species entirely. Genesis 15, which is what we were talking about a little earlier, gives to Israel unconditional ownership of her blessings. The Mosaic covenant outlines the principles for divine discipline when the nation acts up. So even with our own children, we discipline our children, but we don't disown, the children. And so when you see these very strong statements, Old Testament, New Testament, even Synagogue of Satan a couple of times in the book of Revelation, you have to filter that through the right covenantal lens. Those are disciplinary statements. They're very strong. They're very harsh. Israel was, in the first century, nationally, a big problem for the early church. They opposed them constantly. But that's the Mosaic covenant talking, which outlines the principles for divine discipline, which people can read all about in Deuteronomy 28. There's blessings for obedience, verses 1 through 14, curses for disobedience, verses 15 through 68. And that's how to filter those Synagogue of Satan type statements. But you have to understand that typically when you see a statement like that, that's very harsh, a few verses later, the Lord is going to come along and reaffirm his ownership of the nation of Israel. So Paul the Apostle in Romans 11, verse 28, makes this statement. He says, look, currently Israel is your enemy, speaking of the problems that they caused for the early church, but they are beloved on behalf of the patriarchs or the fathers. So under discipline, yes. Can they be a problem? Yes. Is God going to wash his hands of them? He can't, because of the Abrahamic covenant. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
When I first came to America around 1980, I had $500 in my pocket. That's it. Now, if I'd been really frugal and not spent a penny of that money, what do you think it would be worth now? What could it actually buy now compared to what it could buy in 1980? Well, the answer, less than $130. Now, why is that? Because the U.S. government, through the Fed, is constantly printing money and devaluing your money. When the government prints money, there's more money chasing the same amount of goods and services. So guess what? Money goes down in value. Money buys less. The Fed has been at it since 1913. That's why a dollar today can buy just what a few cents could buy in 1913. And the government continues to print oceans of money. It really never stops. Now, an ounce of gold reached a high of $850 in 1980. It's worth now around $3,900 an ounce. So historically over time, we see gold has gone up and up in value. Dollars have gone down and down. And what about in the last 12 months? Gold is up over 40%. I believe now is the time to find out how you can diversify your savings with gold and silver. And this is why I've partnered with Goldco. They offer the best customer service for precious metals ownership. They are also the only gold dealer that offers a first-time gold buyer rebate of up to 10% in bonus silver on qualified purchases. There's no better offer out there, so take advantage. To learn more about how to safeguard your savings from the dollar's decline, go to dineshgold.com. Very simple, easy to remember, dineshgold.com.